I'm the Angry Spork. Throughout Year of the Crossover, we've focused mostly on the well-known heroes clashing, but more obscure characters have teamed up over the years, such as in the review we begin today. I'm taking issue with Ghost Batgirl, written by Mike Kennedy, with art by Ryan Benjamin, Michael Blair, Edgar Delgado, and Digital Broom. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. Issue number 1's cover features Batgirl, Cassandra Cain, perched on a stone structure. Kinda difficult to tell what type, though, as in front of her with a gun in hand is Ghost, who apparently raided Emma Frost's closet for her outfit, which is obviously pretty salacious. Though at this angle, her hood kind of resembles a nun's habit. I hardly ever paid attention to Dark Horse, so you'll have to forgive my ignorance going forward. I checked Wikipedia, and I know that her powers are intangibility and teleportation, so she has a fitting enough name. Though in terms of her costume design, I'm betting she was created in the 90s. Called it. We open in Gotham, as Batgirl watches the aftermath of an explosion that destroyed half the International Diamond Exchange. Narration by Barbara Gordon, aka Oracle, explains her worry over her young charge and how she will fare against the unexpected. I used to think I was invulnerable at her age, but a bullet in my spine showed me just how wrong I was. My mistake was not expecting it. You should have expected the Joker to show up at your doorstep and shoot you in the spine as part of his elaborate plan to drive your dad insane? Jeez, I hope you don't play the lotto, Babs, otherwise you're going to be beating yourself up 2 to 3 times a week. Two-Face claimed responsibility for the bomb attack, but heck if anyone can find a motive. Nothing was stolen and none of the victims seemed to be worthy as a target for death. As one final body is bagged, we get this panel of a woman dressed in a VacuStar rescue uniform, though with blank white eyes, that apparently drives off with a truck full of bodies, to the confusion of one of the legitimate rescue workers. We jump to the city of Arcadia, specifically a strip club called Morpheum.
Coming at you next is the fabulous Dominique. Look out, fellas. This little lady don't take spare change. She gets real mean if the money ain't green. Legal warning that use of green Monopoly money, Toys R Us Jeffrey dollars, or bill-shaped chocolate bars will get you kicked in the teeth. And here comes Saffron.
In the club's VIP room, some guys are watching a private show, one of whom tells his buddy that the girls they're watching are dead. Got it straight from 3-Ball. These chicks is dead. That's why this room is so secret. The room is so secret, yet they announce to the customers how they can buy a special membership for access. Makes total sense. Minor typo that caught my eye. It looks like they put an apostrophe at the end of getting. Like they forgot they wanted to leave out that second G at the end. From this close-up of a young woman, we go to a missing persons flyer, implying they're the same girl. Specifically, the daughter of Gotham Councilman Fletcher, worried that she's either dead or captured by Two-Face, and takes little consolation in Bruce Wayne's optimistic words while they're all at a fancy gala. The girl was seen in the Diamond Exchange when the bomb went off 4 days prior, but there's been no sign of Kendall Fletcher or 5 other bodies since, alive or dead. Bruce excuses himself to talk to Barbara Gordon as Cass walks off briefly. Despite her concern for finding the girl, he wants her to stay out of this, as Two-Face is Batman's responsibility and is enough of a madman to be behind the disappearances despite Oracle's doubts. If he needs help finding Harvey Dent, he'll let her know. If this were a matter of Bruce not wanting Cassie to deal with someone as dangerous as Harvey this early in her career, I could understand that. But Batman's responsibility? If Robin or Nightwing caught him trying to hold up the Second National Bank, does he expect them to just ring his cell and wait for the Dark Knight to arrive? Or what if Harvey feels like taking a road trip to another city? Central City, for example. Does Bruce think the Flash is going to sit still? What's that, Superman? Two-Face has the Daily Planet hostage?
Don't do anything. I'll be in Metropolis by Batplane in 2 hours. Well, because there's taxiing, there's clearance for takeoff, the in-flight movie.
Meanwhile, the aforementioned criminal, seen only from his clean side this whole page, is having a relaxing poker game with his goons, apparently more chipper since the senseless bombing he instrumented. He doesn't even really care when he loses a hand, he even congratulates the winner. When one of his men says people likely think they took the missing bodies, Dent confirms that they can think what they want. Dead bodies aren't of interest to him. An inebriated lackey named Carver accidentally bumps the table and causes Harvey's, I'm gonna say, wine to spill, and the former DA responds by shooting him. Tossed out amongst the garbage by his former cohorts, the last thing Carver sees as everything goes black is a pair of shadows in front of a car's headlights.
Man, those dumpster divers are in for a big surprise.
At the Neptune Modeling Agency in Arcadia, Leo Marino is scouting a young woman for a job, encouraging her to disrobe when Ghost appears. She's looking for a girl named Debbie Scoggins, though that tiny picture looks a lot like that of Kendall Fletcher. He's shown an ad for the agency clipped from the paper found in a journal, I guess belonging to the missing girl, but insists he doesn't know the name. Unconvinced, Ghost checks out his date book while he hangs out the window without his pants. Standard detective work, if you ask me. Her narration explains that she'd have just killed him a year back, but at the time she was operating under memories that were more or less a 3-layer cake of deception, manipulated much like the missing Debbie was into denigrating herself for a sleazy talent agency. She takes the information and leaves Leo alive, as he may prove useful later, but seems to hope otherwise, feeling he deserves to die. While waiting for a call from Batman she knows isn't on its way, Barbara did some digging on her own, finding that the privately funded relief group EvacuStar, based out of Arcadia, had listed every single body as being dropped off at St. Mary's Hospital. But somewhere in the confusion, 5 people turned up missing.
Don't you mean 6? Because earlier you said Kendall was missing as well as 5 other bodies? So either I'm reading that wrong somehow, or you're so ticked off at Batman trying to sideline you that you've forgotten how to do math.
Babs is friends with the admissions clerk at that hospital and knows that she would not have lost 5 bodies like that, so it's time for a little trip to Arcadia. In a mysterious location, Carver wakes up on a slab in a room with 3 other people, one of whom is a maybe doctor that looks like a corpse himself, and told that he's benefited from a revolutionary discovery and got his tonsils removed too.
The move to the ABC network made the final season of Scrubs really weird.
The maybe medic goes on about the Roman belief in the Lethe, a crystal blue river the dead would cross and drink from as they entered the paradise of Elysium to forget their mortal troubles. But if they got reincarnated, they'd cross and drink from it again to forget their previous holy bliss. Carver is injected with a blue fluid and asked if his last memory was more indicative of living or dying.
Well, I was alive until my drunken slight got me shot to death, so... both?
2 pages after saying they'd go, Babs and Cass are at an EvacuStar office in Arcadia, helped by a Mr. Brimler under the guise of Miss Barberry, requesting an audit for the Gotham Paraplegic Association. He assures them that theirs is a non-profit organization with nothing to hide. Cassandra's keen eyes watch him punch in his password, which they later use in their hotel room. Sure, Cassie's method is pretty amateurish, but remember, she might recognize the keys being pressed, but she's still illiterate at this point. Barbara accesses their system with ease, though it does take her some time to follow the necessary trail. From the non-profit EvacuStar to Devlin Media Group, which produces adult videos as well as controlling interest in nightclubs, to the Morpheum, which we saw earlier. As it happens, one of the off-site club managers is Dennis Brimler, the oh-so-well-to-do looking fellow they met earlier.
A revelation that makes Babs's face look like she's about to sneeze, cry, and vomit all at once. I guess they're trying to display her disgust at a guy that came off all kindly and helpful, but she looks more like she's angrily sick than sickly angry. And there's the distinction there, trust me.
Later that night, Cass is staking out the morphium when she sees Ghost face her way inside, apparently unnoticed by employees and clientele alike. And we get this charming panel of a dirtbag ordering a girl not to walk away from him. Regardless of the woman's occupation, he really is a jerk, and I hope he gets a solid punch in the face. It's about then that Batgirl busts in. I don't know who the leather-clad waif is, but she's got a lot of guts bringing trouble in here without a gun.
She don't know her too well, do she? Well, obviously not. She just said so.
Something I found a bit surprising is that when Ghost starts opening fire, B-Girl doesn't seem to do much to stop her. Cass is all about no killing, and you'd think she'd want to limit such potential fatalities, even if the spectral vigilante is going for flesh wounds. Anywho, Ghost narrates that she's uncertain if she's helping out of trust or fear, given how powerful this girl is, but senses that they're on the same side. Good lord. I'm not sure what Ghost is reacting to. Maybe the fact that some people are still indulging in debauchery despite the ruckus. Batgirl drives them off by kicking apart the stripper pole, letting out what I think is either a standard kung fu yell or a really awkward and stretched out "now," as in get out now. And Ghost can detect her youth as well as her commanding power. She finds Debbie Scoggins as Batgirl helps another girl off the floor, voiceless but expressing enough moral outrage that together they may be able to find out what is truly going on. After the issue ends, we get a page summarizing the histories of the title characters, though there are portions of Batgirl's bio that seem a bit off, but part of that may have been because Cassie and her solo title were pretty new at the time.
See, they actually took time to grow the character organically and compellingly over time. Be gone, unholy blights! Anyway, we've been set up with a curious mystery thus far, involving missing, exploited young women and the undead prancing around for the sad and creepy. It is a tad curious how quickly the two heroines decided to work together, though. You could argue that Cass could read Ghost's body language that she didn't have any lethal intent, but Ghost herself didn't hesitate to accept Batgirl. Is that part of her applying more logic than instinct again?
Issue 2's cover is a bit more stylized, kind of resembling a poster for a spy movie. Ghost in the background with her gun at the ready, B-Girl in the foreground launching an attack, and between them, two commando-looking silhouettes, and Oracle looking like she was asked a really stupid question. Who unkilled Kendall Fletcher?
Okay, that probably wasn't the stupid question, because as stupid as it sounds outside the context, with this story it holds some merit.
Dennis Bremler approaches his car after another shift at a VecuStar when he's confronted by our star heroines, one of whom, for all her disgust at the exploitation she's seen thus far, doesn't seem very subtle about where she expects Denny to look. Ghost demands information, including details on the sedated women they rescued from his club. Bremler, however, insists his involvement was legal, no one was forced to do anything, and whatever the girls do outside the club isn't his responsibility. After being asked about Kendall Fletcher being found drugged out of her mind in his establishment, the guy goes from looking like he's huffed too much paint thinner to appearing to be in a trance, saying he's not involved in day-to-day bookings and hasn't been to the club in weeks. The pair leave and are later in a hospital room with Kendall and her father. Ghost, in her civilian identity as Elisa Cameron, lies and says she found the girl in a less than coherent state at a bus station, staring at her own missing persons poster, then brought here. She leaves with Barbara and Cassandra, but seems to object to the idea of them as a team, since Bremler was a dead end. It's explained that Ghost followed Batgirl to their hotel room, only allowing her to do so because she trusts her, and thus Oracle does as well.
And if Oracle trusts her, Nightwing trusts her. And if Nightwing trusts her, Robin trusts her. And if Robin trusts her, Batman still doesn't trust her. He's just not a people person.
Against the advice of the guy that revived him, Carver is returning to Gotham for some unfinished business, but promises to be back since he's taken a liking to the plans of Dr. Greymater. It could be Greymater, but I'm gonna go with Greymater because brains. He advises his associate Chris to tail Carver and make sure he doesn't damage their already delicate situation. In Gotham, Two-Face is talking with a doctor about his recent depression, his medication and doses thereof, hesitant to try a new combination, since what he's been taking keeps his darker half asleep. When one of his goons passes by, saying he thought he heard the crime lord crying, he gets a bullet for his concern. Dent begins stammering afterwards, apparently now in a forgetful haze after the murder, and continues the discussion about his antidepressant meds.
Yeah, he's shot 2 guys dead at the drop of a hat, but it still looks like the Trilithon is working better for him than Zoloft ever did for me.
As she waits alongside Batgirl on a rooftop, Ghost wonders if this alleged trust she's been given can be returned, as they seem to have gathered a lot of info on her, but she knows very little about them. What that information is, we don't know. She's also perplexed by how this teenage girl that can so easily break a man in two is the same bashful one gently handing her a spider. A car pulls up and Leo Marino exits with a pair of bodyguards, so the two descend, Ghost facing Batgirl on their way, and likens the teenager's actions to that of a conversation she prefers to keep brief. Ghost takes out the other bodyguard by phasing his gun into his fingers. I mean, it took me a second to realize it because it's such a small picture, but ouch! They show him Kendall's missing poster, and he recognizes her as a runaway addicted to heroin. But since she was a legal adult, he didn't think twice about putting her to work at the Morpheum's back room. His apathy is getting them nowhere, so Ghost leads him to Cassandra.
Here's a test to see how skilled Cassie truly is. Break the guy's foot by punching him in the face. If it doesn't work the first time, try again.
Leo suddenly becomes more amiable, and his eyes oddly more relaxed, saying they should look where she was last seen to find out what brought her to him in the first place. They'll do that, but Ghost warns that she may not be so reasonable upon their next meeting. When the women leave, Leo makes a call to a Mr. G.
Wayne Gretzky?
Two-Face's hideout, some of his goons are aiming their guns at a bird on the TV for some reason, wondering where their buddy Pete is. Harvey plays it cool, but then the surprise that he's probably dead in the trash is spoiled by someone with experience in that area.
Carver! You wear a beret now?
Maybe you should look in the garbage pile, Freddy.
Pete has suffered a fate worse than death. He starred in the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
While Dent seems more or less unfazed by this revelation, the recently undeceased says he's with a gang that hasn't quite gone public yet, but doesn't get you shot by your boss and offers the others a chance to join too. It's such a tough decision, Harv decides to flip a coin. That comes up scarred. He opens fire, shooting Carver at least 4 times at the offense of trying to recruit his goons from him. But he proves more tenacious than most corpses. On a page where the dialogue is unusually large in typeface, Dent hesitates on a headshot while a motorcycle rides up, collects Carver, and drives off. Freddy, get me an eye in the sky.
I'd like to, boss. Really, I would. But since your whole motif insists on half of everything being burned, those carrier pigeons just don't fly very well anymore.
At the hotel, Oracle retrieves unaltered original dispatch records from EvacuStar's archive servers, discovering the driver of the van sent to the Diamond Exchange site, Nelson Potter. We jump to his 2-bedroom apartment in Arcadia, something Ghost's narration considers a bit modest for someone possibly taking money under the table. He's visited by the co-worker that stranded him at the beginning of the story, forcing him to bus back from Gotham. She promises it won't happen again, removing her hat and revealing snakes for hair. She proceeds to cut Nelson's throat as Ghost and Batgirl phase through the window, and from the dialogue it seems this shapeshifter named Trixie has a bit of a history with the white sort-of-clad heroine. Shedding the uniform, the villainess escapes through an elevator, narrated to have switched from using bombs to knives, which seems to make sense to Elisa, since this started with a bomb in Gotham. It's almost like she's insinuating Trixie had something to do with the explosion, even though Two-Face publicly owned up to it. You'd think her new allies would have mentioned something about that. On the word of a pedestrian, Ghost heads upwards, until going back, thinking Trixie took on the form of the innocent grocery-toting tenant. Batgirl stops her with a commanding word, realizing that anger had clouded her judgment, and the comic ends with Trixie watching from just above the elevator, blending into the darkened walls. Then we get short bios on Malcolm Greymater and Two-Face.
And that's where we leave the review for now. The story's moved along pretty well so far, if with a couple of told rather than shown moments, but they're not so jarring just because we missed Ghost tracking Batgirl back to a hotel room. And Elisa Cameron's observations of our teen crime fighter feels a lot more thoughtful than some other stories I could name.
I thought the art was more or less fine, sometimes a little oversexed, but given the places we go in this story, it's at least understandable. However, there were moments where characters just really looked unpleasant or weird. One page has Barbara looking like she's on the verge of tears or vomiting. Another has Cassie's head shaped like an Advil gel cap. Then here, where Elisa Cameron looks like she's been beaten with an ugly stick after being awake for 2 days. And did the artist somehow get the impression that Cassie was Native American? That might explain her unusually darker complexion and this top she wore in the hospital, which feels very much inspired by that culture. Reminder, Cassie is half Chinese, half Caucasian. And no, this doesn't count. It never counts.
Urge to kill rising.
Some of the dialogue and narration text were larger in some places than in others, particularly in issue 2, perhaps to fill some otherwise empty space. And then there's this page where Babs reveals the unmodified records. The outlines look so jagged it's almost like it was originally drawn smaller, then resized to something larger in Photoshop.
Then you have the curiosity of Two-Face and his depression. They could have pretty easily just let him go as a catalyst for one more body to be used in Greymater's experimentations, but it seems he's going to play a much larger role. Will that work out in the end? Tune in next week when we look over the final half of the series. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Ghost Batgirl. A deadly explosion, missing bodies, and a seedy underworld of exploitation has combined the forces of Elisa Cameron and Cassandra Cain. At the center is the self-described benevolent criminal mastermind Malcolm Greymater, apparently able to restore life to the recent dead. One of his successful revivals tried to get revenge on his former boss, Two-Face, who is now fixated on this mysterious organization. The two heroines, meanwhile, lost their latest lead in the mystery to Greymater's deadly shapeshifter.
Issue number 3's cover is a bit less than encouraging, with Greymater's henchwoman Towering Chris standing in front of a skylight while holding a heroine in each hand by either collar or cape. Someone's definitely been eating their Wheaties. We begin with Greymater removing bullets from Carver, likening the people he's revived to children with difficult lessons in limitations yet to learn. He asks the ex-coffin occupant what he was thinking, but he doesn't recall. It's like my brain is, I don't know, like it's got hair growing on it.
My barber wanted to charge extra for brain surgery, and my surgeon wanted to charge extra for a haircut. Can you believe that?
He remembers his name, Ken Carver, but not his mother's, not that he knew that anyway, but Greymater isn't worried since the goon has the benefit of his most recent surgical implementations. That's when Trixie returns, confirming that she killed Nelson Potter, but she had a run-in with Ghost and a costumed associate, leading the Mad Doctor to think there needs to be a face-to-face meeting. Meanwhile, Two-Face is arriving in Arcadia, reading in a newspaper about how Kendall Fletcher was found alive and returned home. Freddy, one of the henchmen Dent hasn't shot yet, says she was the looker he followed at the Diamond Exchange, and how curious it is she survived the explosion. But enough about that. It's time for Harvey's medicine.
One of Two-Face's goons happens to recognize a woman that was at the diamond exchange that allegedly died. Is this building up to something, or merely increasing Two-Face's curiosity about all the dead bodies running around all of a sudden?
In the hotel room, working off some of Ghost's information, Barbara is trying to track down Trixie. And, geez, look at Cassie and Ghost. It looks like they're intentionally avoiding eye contact. Elisa with her hand on her hip, eyes to the side, a maskless Batgirl with her arms crossed and head tilted slightly upward. Did they have a nasty argument before the issue started? Anyway, Elisa says that Trixie and the Amazonian accomplice work on behalf of someone called the General, and they might be under some kind of mental conditioning. Maybe that would explain Shaquille O'Neal. Anyway, they're difficult to track, but that's not necessary, as B-Girl masks up just before Trixie and Chris crash through the window, looking to take Miss Cameron with them. Cass wastes no time taking on the scrappy but physically unthreatening Trixie, but Chris, Ghost describes, is over 6.5 feet tall and bulletproof.
And I'm suddenly reminded of a country song. Did someone listen to Travis Tritt while writing this and just cut the height by 3.5 feet?
Additionally, Chris is sporting gloves that can hit Elisa even when she's intangible, and hit she does. Batgirl intervenes, getting Chris in a headlock, only for Trixie to join in the dog pile and has one of her scalp snakes bite Cassie's cheek. When she falls, Ghost finally agrees to go with them. And they don't even have to threaten Barbara either. Harvey and his crew stop where they've tracked the bike that took Carver in the previous issue. When Greymater appears with his men, knowing Dent's name, Harv largely plays it cordial, but does throw in a warning for the Doctor to keep his men off his recruitment list. The General can't help it if his organization is more appealing, as echoed by Carver, who reminds his ex-boss that he shot him. Several times. Greymater asks what Harvey wants, if it'll ease the situation. "Gimme Carver back! And if that's Augustine in the corner there, I want him back too!"
Why? So if they sneeze weird or leave a faucet running, you can just shoot them again? That's terrible. But Harvey's still a better boss than someone I could name.
Since Harvey invests so much time and money into his crew, he wants the two he killed back, or two others just like him, since they can apparently take a lot of punishment. So maybe my joke just now wasn't so far off. However, Greymater won't just give anyone over since they're still men, implying it'd be of their own choice. Dent leaves for now, but whispers to Freddy to have 6 dozen shooters brought in by dawn. Trixie informs the General that Ghost has been brought in, and he tells the modern-day Gorgon to keep tabs on the departing out-of-towners. And check out Carver. That's probably not the best sign. So Greymater finally meets Elisa Cameron for the first time, saying how much he admires her spirit, while also formally introducing himself and offering a rose. He's downright gentlemanly.
Which, if going by the synopsis from the end of issue 2, seems to be pretty in character. Frankly, it makes him a very interesting villain.
Ghost says she isn't one for chatting it up with slave traders that fake people's deaths and sell them into servitude, but the General clarifies the deaths were never faked. Rather, he gave those people a future by bringing them back to life.
Really? You know, I have this friend from DC Comics. I know what you're going to ask, and I've already looked into reviving the DC Cineverse, and, well, there are some things that even I can't bring back from the dead.
Barbara is treating Cass with a blood toxin kit, finding the poison could have killed someone twice her size, but she endures, likely due to her mysterious training. I guess there's nothing to suggest her dad didn't try building her resistance to poisons, though I don't remember it ever being brought up in her own comics, but hey, it's been a while. She wakes up and immediately heads out the window after Ghost, because forget keeping her circulation down. Across town, Freddy has called in 69 additional men for Two-Face, figuring the 2 of them and the Doctor made it an even 72 like he wanted.
Yeah, I figured the Doc might just start throwing antidepressants at them. You never know, some of our enemies might actually take some by accident. That'd help?
As Fred gathers the crew for a word from the boss, Harvey passes on another aspirin and begins his speech. It starts off by claiming their opponents insulted them and their intelligence, which I get that he's trying to rally them all behind him, but this isn't even an exaggeration. It's an outright lie of Zap Brannigan proportions. And this is a more mellow Harvey. He adds not to be fooled by familiar faces when the bullets start flying, as we close in on a yellow-eyed, mustachioed chap that's not really a chap, but moving on. This monologue is being transmitted to an earpiece worn by Chris, who, along with Carver, follow Ghost and Greymater, the latter of whom begins talking about how the catacombs they're walking in needed very little modification for his ever-growing empire. And how big is your empire? Not big enough.
I was this close to buying Marvel, then Disney swooped in from under my deformed nose.
The General is working towards a day when people are free from legal constraints of what he terms the occasional victimless crime, which Ghost doesn't believe exists because she includes those who die as a result of their own actions. They find some common ground in, for example, jailing someone who would sell weapons to kids, but violence cannot be cured, only its symptoms treated. Greymater even wants to eliminate the brute force politics that perpetuate dishonest commerce, that contribute to the violence, by using his own army that isn't afraid to die since, been there, done that.
I really like this exchange. While Greymater is more courteous and benevolent than most other villains, he is still a villain, though one with a unique motive and a rationale that is admittedly appealing. We'd love to get rid of the corruption in politics and the business people that legally profit off the suffering of others, though his Night of the Living henchman is still sketchy as all get out.
They enter a room containing the engine, a device based on the technology he used a century back to extended his own life. A typo of Ralph Wiggum-like proportions, ladies and gentlemen. The machine preserves brain functions while the rest of the body is restored through modern medical techniques. Get a fresh enough corpse before too much cellular death, keep the brain alive, as it is the irreplaceable pilot of the human machine, and he's got another soldier for his army. Those that can't pull a trigger, like Kendall Fletcher, are sold off, because why not make a profit off unfortunate miscarriages? He restored her to life, which, if a crime, he suggests jailing doctors, and Greymater goes on to accuse Ghost of adding pain to the already bereaved Fletcher family, as she can no longer be the same person as before.
Note how, despite claiming to not want to further the burden of a grieving family, he still profited from selling a woman into slavery, one he admits is alive because he wanted to play God. Compartmentalization, folks. Well-intentioned villainy is still villainy.
The General has explained all this in the hope that he and Elisa can coexist, but since that isn't likely, he still needs her out of the way. Chris grabs her arm with her gloves, apparently giving her spider sense before knocking her out. He orders her taken to the box for a few hours, and at least 50 men ready for an upcoming battle. Carver asks, based on the General's explanation of his process, if his own brain is rotting, but is assured it just needs time to heal, especially for the looming conflict ahead. Meanwhile, sleazy talent agent Leo finds his office wrecked and calls disguised Trixie about it, figuring it was the two costume women that have confronted him prior. She, disguised as he, hangs up, infuriating Leo into heading down to see the General in person. And who should be watching but a silent young woman hanging in the shadows?
You sly little bat, you. Though, I have to say, she seemed to have lucked out here. There's a chance that Leo wouldn't have known where to find Greymater, or possibly too intimidated to go himself. The only alternative, though, would have been to confront him and make him tell her what she wanted to know, but with her limited speech capabilities, she might not be able to pronounce the right words.
Issue number 4's cover sees the heroines take on each other's adversary. Ghost apparently jumping out a window while phasing her hand into Dent's chest.
Elisa Cameron, superhero, crime fighter, amateur cardiologist.
She's woken up in a haze, due in part to the cage she's in emitting some kind of non-electrical energy that messes with her head too much for her to focus her powers. In front of her sits fellow dead man Carver, looking to compare notes. Despite whatever Greymater may have told him, she's not actually dead, and the General will sacrifice anyone to get what he wants. Chris interjects, praising her leader's ambition, and sends Carver upstairs. While the enemy muscle woman thinks Ghost simply refuses to admit she's wrong, it's more about the sacrilege of using the dead for his own gain.
So, you're fighting for the rights of the dead now? Someone has to.
All she needs now is a lot of green to snag William Shatner for TV ads, and she's good to go.
At that moment at street level, roughly 80 feet above the prison, Leo is trying and failing to get an audience with Mr. G when Batgirl makes an appearance. Greymater's narration notes how she exceeds his expectations, even if the men she fights are working at half capacity, and even compliments the effective intimidation of her costume. Not sure how he's seeing all this, though. As she makes her way inside the facility, he ponders killing Batgirl just to use his machine to bring her back. Can you imagine how unstoppable she'd be then?
Well, near the end of her solo title, she did die and get brought back. And she wasn't so much unstoppable as pointlessly turned evil by editorial idiocy. Then later reinvented with more idiocy. Angry spork want machete justice!
Turns out Greymater was nearby, watching all this from the shadows, though that raises the question of how Cass missed him, but hey, she's not Daredevil. Leo wants out of this deal with the long-lived scientist, but the General assures him he has no reason to worry, and soon enough their partnership will be secretive once more, so long as he follows downstairs, where the pointy-eared ninja just descended. Two-Face has crashed his way through one of the garage doors, and his current right hand, Freddy, calls Carver out. We see the formerly dead goon saying this is a stupid move, and how much of a psycho Harvey is, while standing in front of an explosion? There's no real context for where Carver is or what's going on, and it feels very confusing. The disguised Trixie puts a gun to Fred's head, while Cassandra manages to find Ghost. Rather quickly when you think about it, since this is supposed to be 8 stories underground with pre-existing caverns. A little convenient even for Cassie. She instinctively wants to bust the glass wall, but is told to shut off the power first. Enter towering Chris, whom Ghost knows is quite formidable, but then again so is Batgirl.
Wow, not bad. I haven't had a broken nose in almost 10 years. How about you?
You merely adopted the broken nose, Chris. She was born in it, raised by it.
As bullets zip by, Trixie attempts to coax Fred to join their crew, incentivizing him by returning to her standard form, giving him a smooch, and making a run for it. She goes to Greymater, holding some manner of court with numerous associates, while the battle rages, and told of their falling numbers. Recalling a lesson in choreographed retreat from his time in the Civil War, yeah, seriously, he's that old, he instructs her on how to proceed, and to prepare the fireworks while Leo and the others stay put until things are straightened out. Chris seems to have knocked out Batgirl while keeping Ghost from escaping through a wall. Cameron improvises by grabbing a feather pen from an inkwell in the other room and stabbing her foe with it.
Don't you get it? That trick don't work on me. My body just absorbs the stuff eventually.
What stuff? Are you talking about matter in general, or just quill pens? If it's the latter, that's a weirdly specific superpower.
As Cassie comes around, Ghost phases a book into Chris's head, incapacitating her, and the two make their exit.
I've heard of having your head in a book, but this is ridiculous. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha.
Back at the shootout, Carver is still trying to convince Freddy to flip, noting how even other gangs consider Two-Face heartless. After he takes a couple shots, Fred dives to save him, though he is a walking corpse, so save might be a bit inaccurate. Harvey decides he no longer wants Carver back, given his lack of loyalty, but Freddy turns on him, choosing not to kill his old friend. So Dent shoots Fred and flips his coin for Carver. It comes up clean, so he leaves him there to rot, and on his way out finds his men being attacked by more traditional flesh-eating zombies. Elisa and Cass pass by overhead, but the young martial artist frees herself from her ally's grip to confront Dent. Meanwhile, Trixie's gone to tell her boss the Grants are loose, meaning the zombies, and the fireworks are lit, when she sees her sister's unique condition. After Greymater places something into a nodule in his neck, or removes it, kinda hard to tell, he insists that they leave without further concern to Ghost, while the book in Chris's head seems to glow gray.
As fairly disturbing as that image is, I bet Scrubs would have found a way to make it hilarious. JD diagnoses someone with encyclopedia brain tanica. Dr. Cox calls him a girl's name, while normally brilliant Elliot fumbles in otherwise calm social situations. And Dr. Cox calls JD another girl's name. Good times.
With the heroines kept busy by the zombies, Two-Face makes a getaway with the Doctor at the wheel, admitting he could have planned things better and maybe his ego got the better of him, like at the Diamond Exchange, so he asks for another aspirin. I swear, these things are about as effective as sugar pills. You feeding me placebos, Doc?
Or did I switch 'em with vitamin C caps when you weren't looking?
The Harvey Dent half was apparently so distracted by the Fletcher girl, the Two-Face half figured he was getting too hopeful, and might even have asked her out, so he bombed the exchange building.
And Two-Face figured the girl would say yes to the wanted criminal that frequents an insane asylum and has half of his face scarred over? I know he's kind of nuts, but if he's using some kind of rationale to think Harv had his eyes on a young woman and that might affect their delicate balance, then he'd have to know most women wouldn't be into him.
The gangster figures the Doc either wanted to atone for some previous medical misconduct or possibly just be a hero by curing or suppressing a madman. Either one comes right out of left field, and he shoots him anyway.
He's your driver, you dope. This is exactly why I don't use Uber.
Fortunately, Ghost has already phased the Doctor and pulls him to safety, while Batgirl blocks the windshield briefly before the car crashes into a pole. Dent considers punching his own ticket as Cass pulls him out through the skylight, and Ghost leaves the Doc with her so as to go after the General. And that's when the base explodes. But he, his henchwomen, and the engine are in a van ready to head out of town. So investigating authorities will believe they and their equipment were all destroyed, along with their cannon fodder and associates. And so the story closes with the trio heading somewhere to renew their operations with greater discretion. I hear Metropolis is nice this time of year.
And that was Ghost Batgirl. And it was overall pretty good.
The art had its share of hiccups, like an apparent confusion over Cassie's ethnicity, how many legs a spider should have, and some angles or expressions being done awkwardly. I don't think someone being interrogated should look more tired than scared. But those instances aside, it was still well drawn and had some nice touches like the details on Harvey's scarring. I liked that the story had a kind of modest, down-to-earth feel to it even when things went all fringe science fiction. I may have left a couple things out, but otherwise it was well-paced and omissions felt largely minor.
Though certain additions at the last minute bordered on the convenient, like Two-Face's doctor's heretofore unmentioned occupational disgrace, leading him to attempt to improve the criminal's disposition. I get wanting to give him some kind of rationale, some kind of backstory, but he was a minor character, and he got as much focus as he really needed. Though, given the results his treatment had, when you look at the whole story, it feels like his motives should have been clarified earlier, maybe peppered throughout the first couple of issues, not the last couple of pages.
Same goes for the camaraderie amongst Two-Face's crew. Them fearing for their safety when he snaps at a spilled drink is one thing, but it was never really established that they were particularly close as associates in crime, that they'd risk their own lives for each other. Most henchmen to supervillain types tend to be in it for the money and that's it. Not necessarily heartless, but not exactly selfless either. Some of these Dark Horse characters, however, get very little described about them as well. Normally, there'll be a descriptive caption, real names, secret identities, modus operandi, that sort of thing. Here, much of the story felt a little like going in blind as a... well, you know. But in the end, the origins of Towering Chris or Trixie weren't all that pivotal to the plot, and the humbling nature of Malcolm Greymater was pretty well described in his mannerisms with his patients and his discussion with Ghost about the root causes of societal ills. It's one of the better examples of a villain with understandable, borderline noble intentions, but the book doesn't let you forget that he's still the bad guy. And in a possibly similar fashion, when we first see Two-Face in this story, he's laid back, he's having fun. Sure, he just blew up a building and killed a bunch of people, but he's having a friendly card game with his crew, and the entire time, you just see the Harvey Dent half. And when they finally show his scarred half, it's when he's killing someone over an innocent accident. And given the horrified reaction everyone gives, except for the drunken Carver, it feels like this is probably not the first time. It's not a visual maneuver I remember seeing very often in Two-Face stories, and I think it was a really smart choice.
Perhaps echoing the obscurity of these two characters being thrown into battle together, there were some atypical elements at work here.
Most crossovers, which features characters meeting for the first time, perhaps being uneasy or untrusting to some degree, then end with the heroes shaking hands, parting ways, or settling back into their usual routines. This one sees trust established rather quickly, which I can kind of see from Cassie's end, but Elisa Cameron seemed rather quick to trust them despite some misgivings, and I don't know if that's in character because, again, I've never read her books. Then it ends rather abruptly, teasing a Superman Ghost crossover that never happened, and I'm not even sure it was ever planned from what I've searched. And the General's army and associates, all gone. Couple that with the fact this is the first time Ghost has met Greymater. These are things that affect the ongoing continuity in the Dark Horse universe, and that's something else most crossovers don't do. At least where Elisa Cameron's adventures are concerned, this story doesn't seem so self-contained. The ending did feel sudden, but I guess I can't really think of much else the heroines could have done, either in terms of the case or on a personal level. Saying goodbye, walking off into the sunset, yada yada yada.
If you like Cassie in her early days, not the rehashed early days mandated by post-Flashpoint stupidity, and don't mind sampling the waters of another comic company's character, I give this a recommendation. It's not epic, but still a fun read. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.